It started with a text message, not mine, hers. I should have been focused on making breakfast, trying to get ready for the day. But when I walked into the kitchen that morning, something felt off. Sophie had left her phone on the counter as she dashed upstairs to grab her purse. It was unusual for her to leave it unlocked. But maybe she was in a rush. Maybe she didn't think anything of it. She'd been doing that a lot lately, rushing, acting a little distant. But I brushed it off. It's nothing, just a phase. I thought we've been married for 10 years. After all, 10 years of laughter, fights, and what I thought unwavering trust. But in that moment, the trust shattered like a cheap vase hitting the floor. Her phone buzzed again. My gaze flicked over. Maybe I was just curious. Maybe something in me screamed to take a peek. I didn't want to. I tried to resist. But something changed. I leaned closer. The message glared at me from the screen can. You come earlier. Can't wait to see you again. It was from someone named Daniel. My mind went blank. The words on the screen swirling. There was no way Sophie, my wife, who could she possibly be texting like this? I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. So I grabbed the phone just to check. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Right? Maybe it's nothing. I opened the message thread. The words on the screen were like a stab to the chest. The more I read, the more it sounded like something else entirely. There were mentions of hotel rooms, late-night rendezvous plans to meet at a lounge that night, even some strangely intimate exchanges. This wasn't about work. This was something else, something that tore at me like I was standing at the edge of a cliff looking down at the jagged rocks below. She was having an affair. It tried to breathe, tried to calm myself. This couldn't be happening. But it was. The proof was in front of me. Sophie, my wife, the woman I loved, the one I shared my life with, was texting him like they were more than just co-workers. They were something more, something deep, too deep for my stomach to handle. The room started spinning. My pulse was roaring in my ears as I scrolled through the rest of the messages. They weren't subtle, they were bold, and they were real. I could feel the walls closing in around me. How long had this been going on? How could I have missed it then, as if I wasn't already reeling? I saw it, a confirmation for tonight at the Chelsea Lounge, dinner drinks, a meeting. They were meeting tonight. And Sophie, she had the nerve to tell me she was heading out for a dinner with some colleagues. I froze. My heart was in my throat. There was no way I could let her get away with this. Not like this. I sat down at the counter, holding the phone in my hand like it weighed 1. The air felt thick, sick, suffocating. Betrayal has a peculiar way of making time stand still. It's like everything around you slows to a crawl while you drown in disbelief. Sophie came back into the room, her steps light, her face radiant, as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her keys from the counter and said, "I'm heading out for dinner with some colleagues." "Don't wait up." Her voice was so casual, so normal, as if nothing had changed, as if my world hadn't just exploded. I barely responded, keeping my voice steady. Sure, she smiled, oblivious, and just like that she was gone, leaving me alone with the wreckage of our life on my hands. The phone sat in front of me, its screen still glowing with her lies I didn't confront. Her. Not yet. I wasn't sure if I could, but I couldn't just do nothing. I had to act. I needed to know who this Daniel really was. I needed to understand what I was up against, because something told me this wasn't just about an affair. This was about me taking back control. This was about exposing the truth. I sat there, the phone in my hands, my mind spinning a million miles an hour. I couldn't let her have this. She couldn't get away with this. Not when everything we built together was on the line. Not when she shattered everything we shared with a single message. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't just angry, I was hurt, betrayed, and I needed to make sure she felt the exact same way. No explanation, no excuses. I needed her to see the devastation. She caused to feel it in the deepest way possible. And that was when the idea started to form. The first step was to figure out who this Daniel really was. I wasn't the only one drowning in this mess. After Sophie walked out that door, her phone still warm in my hands, I did what any betrayed man would do. I went looking for answers, not to cry about it, not to beg her to explain. I wanted the truth cold and unfiltered, and I wanted to hit back where it hurt the most. Daniel, the name, sat there like a stain on my screen, and my fingers hovered over the letters. Who was this man? Was he someone I had met before, a stranger, or worse, a friend? The possibilities made my stomach churn. A quick search was all it took. Daniel Whitmore, a successful corporate lawyer, well-dressed, well-connected, and living a life of privilege in a high-rise on the Upper East Side. His social media was a carefully curated portfolio of his achievements, glossy black and white, firm headshots, photos of him at charity galas, award ceremonies, speaking engagements, a man who exuded power, the kind that made other men feel small. But that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the woman standing next to him in several of those photos, petite, sleek, brown hair, sharp jawline, and a polished, effortless kind of beauty. The type of woman who never had a strand of hair out of place, the type of woman who walked into a room and owned it without saying a word. Victoria Whitmore, his wife. And just like that, everything changed. For a moment I hesitated. This was bigger than me now. Dragging another innocent person into this mess felt cruel. I knew what it felt like to have your world shattered in an instant, to feel like an idiot while the person you trusted most fed you lie after lie. Did she deserve that? But then I thought about it. Yes, she did, not because she was to blame, but because she needed to know the way I had to find out alone in my kitchen, staring at that glowing screen like it was a death sentence that wasn't, right? If Daniel was stepping out on her the way Sophie was on me, she deserved to see the wreckage before he had the chance to cover his tracks. I made my move the next morning. I waited outside Daniel Whitmore's apartment building, a fortress of glass and steel that loomed over the city like a monument to arrogance, the kind of place where people with money locked themselves away from the rest of the world. It was cold. My hands buried deep in my pockets, my pulse steady but thrumming with anticipation. And then she walked out, Victoria Whitmore. She moved like someone who had never had to second-guess her own presence. Her trench coat was perfectly tailored, her leather tote slung over her arm like a statement. She wasn't rushing. She had the air of a woman who knew the world moved around her, not the other way around. I stepped forward. Mrs. Whitmore, she stopped, turned, her eyes landed on me, sharp but curious. Yes, do I know you know, but we have something in common. I kept my voice even calm. We don't know each other, but we should talk. She arched an eyebrow, her grip tightening slightly on the strap. Her back out. I pulled out my phone, opened the thread, turned the screen, towered her. Her gaze dropped. She read the color drained from her face. I had expected shock, maybe even tears, but instead there was only a brief flicker of disbelief before she steadied herself, pressing her lips into a thin line. She swallowed. Her voice came out quieter this time. Are you sure about this? He nodded, positive. I'm not here to cause a scene. I just thought you deserved to know. Silence then, as if a switch had flipped inside her. She exhaled slowly. Here, expression changed cold. calculated, the kind of look that told me this wasn't a woman who broke easily. Do you have a plan? That's when I knew I had underestimated her. Victoria Whitmore wasn't just going to crumble under the weight of this. She wasn't going to retreat into a sobbing mess like some wronged housewife in a soap opera. She was ready for war, and suddenly I knew exactly what I needed to do. Yes, I said, my mind already spinning faster now, and it involves you. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, and for the first time I saw it, the fire. She crossed her arms. I'm listening. We sat down in a nearby cafe, an upscale place where no one raised their voice above a whisper, where people hid behind their designer sunglasses and business casual armor, and for the next hour, over bitter coffee and shared heartbreak, we plotted not just revenge, justice by the time we left. We had a plan so precise, so devastating. I almost felt sorry for Sophie, and Daniel. Almost the Chelsea Lounge was a place built for secrets dimly lit, tucked away in the heart of Manhattan, where rich men whispered promises they never intended to keep, and women pretended not to know. It was exactly the kind of place Daniel and Sophie would pick a cocoon of, deception wrapped in expensive liquor and jazz music. Victoria and I walked in together, our steps deliberate, our presence unnoticed. At first, she was dressed in a fitted navy dress, poised and elegant, her expression unreadable. I had opted for something simple, dark jeans, a button-down, the kind of outfit that made me blend in just enough while still holding my ground. We spotted them immediately. Sophie, my wife, leaning close to him. Daniel, her lover, resting his hand on her thigh. My stomach turned. At the sight, I had imagined it. Of course, replayed their messages in my head 1,000 times, but seeing it, watching her, giggle, watching him brush her cheek like she was his, it was different, it was real. Victoria stopped beside me, her body stiff. I didn't look at her, I didn't need, till we were both standing at the edge of something we could never come back from. Ready, I murmured. Her voice was smooth. Steady, Leighton, make them squirm. We moved, deliberate, unrushed. Sophie's laugh rang out just as I slid into the booth. Beside her I could feel the moment her entire body tined, her breath hitched, her smile froze, her fingers clenched against the table. Daniel, oblivious at first, turned to see who had joined them, and when his gaze landed on Victoria, all the color drained from face. She slid in beside him, her lips curving into a slow, mocking smile. "Hello, darling." For a moment nobody spoke. The weight of what was happening crushed the space between us. Sophie's hand was still on the table, frozen in midair, like she had forgotten what she was doing. I leaned in just a little, my voice dangerously calm, surprised to seem sweetheart. Sophie swallowed her hands, now fidgeting with the hem of her dress mark. I thought you were home. I should have been home, clueless, waiting for my wife to come back from her dinner with colleagues. I let the silence stretch, just long enough to make her squirm Daniel on. The other hand had barely breathed. He was staring at Victoria like she was a ghost. Interrupting, Victoria? Asked, tilting her head. Daniel finally found his voice. Amelia, wrong name. Victoria's smile didn't waver, but her fingers curled against the table. "Try again, darling," she murmured. "Or are you so used to lying you can't remember who you're supposed to be with?" More silence. Good, let them stew in it, let them feel even an ounce of the panic that had been clawing at my chest since I read those messages. Sophie's eyes darted around the lounge, desperate, looking for a way out. "Mark," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please, not here." "Why not?" I asked, leaning back. "You didn't seem to have a problem being here with him." A few heads started turning in our direction. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to maintain some dignity. "We should talk about this privately." Victoria let out a short, humorless laugh. No, Daniel. Privacy is a luxury. You lost the second you decided to bring your affair to a public place. Sophie flinched. Daniel clenched his jaw. I turned my gaze back to my wife. The woman. I had built a life with the woman I had trusted. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was calm because I had already won. Sophie's fingers twitched like she wanted to reach for me, like she wanted to fix this. Mark, I save it. Victoria tapped her nails against the table, her voice, almost bored. You know, what's funny, you two thought you were so clever, thought you were sneaky. Did it ever occur to you that secrets like this have a way of surfacing? Daniel's hands clenched into fists. Victoria, stop. Oh, now you want control, she mused. That's adorable. A few quiet chuckles drifted from the tables nearby. The whispers had started the murmurs. The eyes. Sophie's face crumpled. In horror, Daniel still pretending to have some power in this situation. Abruptly stood his chair, screeched against the floor. This is ridiculous, ridiculous. Victoria tilted her head, or just true. Sophie grabbed for her purse, her entire body trembling. We need to go, I blocked her path. Not physically, just enough. What's the rush? He asked. You seemed perfectly comfortable 5 minutes ago. She looked up at me, then her lips parted, her eyes pleading. Pleading not because she regretted what she had done, because she had been caught. Daniel exhaled sharply, like he had finally accepted he was drowning. Talk somewhere. She stood, adjusted her dress, smoothed her hair, then voice cool and controlled. She looked him dead in the eyes and said, You can go, I'm staying right here. Daniel hesitated for the first time all night. I saw it, the panic, the realization that everything he had built was falling apart. Sophie, on the other hand, was already slipping past me, walking toward the exit as fast as her shaking legs could carry her. She didn't look back, she never did. And just like that, they were gone, Victoria, and I stood there unmoving. As the whispers grew around us, the victors of a battle fought in broad daylight. But this was only the beginning. I wasn't done, not even close. The Chelsea Lounge was only the opening act, a performance to shake them, to make them feel the first sting of exposure. But now it was time to break them. Victoria and I sat in my living room that night, the adrenaline from the confrontation still pulsing through us. She had kicked off her heels, curled onto my couch, like she had lived here for years, scrolling through her phone with the same calm precision of a surgeon. I had my laptop open, pulling every trace of Sophie's affair into a neat, undeniable file. Daniel won't survive this, Victoria Ahmed, sipping hay whiskey. She had barely blinked since we left the lounge. Her fury was cold, methodical, sharp. His firm has a strict moral clause. If they find out, she trailed off, then smirked. She didn't need to finish the sentence because we weren't just going to let them find out. We were going to hand it to them on a silver platter. I leaned back, exhaling. You said his firm eats bad PR like it's poison worse, she murmured, tapping her fingers against her glass. They don't just cut the infected limb. They burn it. I looked at my laptop. Perfect. I had everything I needed. Screenshots, time-stamped messages, even a receipt from the hotel they'd met at last week. I wasn't stupid. I knew Sophie had been careful. She hadn't left paper trails, no credit card charges, no obvious slip-ups. But technology, that was where she failed. Every hidden message, every whispered promise, every single damn lie, it was all here just waiting to be used, and I was about to use it. Victoria crossed her legs, looking up at me. How do you want to do this? I met her gaze. I want her to feel it from every direction. I want her to look around and realize she has nowhere left to hide. She hummed an approval. Then let's get started first. Target Daniel's career. Victoria knew exactly who to send it to his firm's ethics committee with a few clicks. She attached every damning piece of evidence into a clean, professional email. No emotion, no extra words, just the facts. Subject line: urgent concern regarding partner conduct. The body was: short clip to whom it may concern. I believe this evidence will shed light on Daniel Whitmore's recent misconduct, which may be of relevance to your firm's professional integrity policies. The attached files include evidence of an ongoing extramarital affair with a client's spouse conducted during work hours and facilitated through company resources I trust. You will act accordingly. And send. Victoria leaned back, exhaling. That should do it. Now it was my turn. Next target: Sophie's perfect little world. Sophie thrived on image. She wasn't just someone's wife. She was the envied wife, the one who hosted charity lunch, the one who handpicked which couple she socialized with, the one who ended. Her life was flawless, and now I was going to take that. From her, I started with the Parent Association group chat, a cesspool of women who lived for gossip. I drafted a message carefully, worded for maximum damage. It's always the ones who smile the hardest, isn't it? Sophie Whitmore, proud mother, devoted wife, cheating on her husband with a married man, a man who, by the way, happens to be a senior partner at Whitmore and Hale. Don't believe me? See for yourself. Then the pictures, the texts, the proof. Send within seconds. The chat exploded. Wait, what? No way. You serious? OMG, I knew it. She always acted too perfect. What a hypocrite does Mark know? I smiled. Let them tear her apart. Then I moved on to her circle, the people she needed to stay relevant. An email to the head of the charity board she worked with a subject line that simply read, urgent, discreet information. Regarding Sophie Whitmore, a message to the local event planner who managed all of her social gatherings with just one question: would you still work with a known home wrecker? A text to the most vicious woman in her circle, not direct evidence, but a whisper, just enough fuel to ignite the fire. And then I sat back and watched it burn. Victoria's phone buzzed. First, she lifted it, smirked. That was fast. What? Daniel's firm is already in emergency meetings. She turned the screen toward me. It's spreading. I checked my own phone. The messages were pouring in. Mark, please tell me this isn't true, dude. I don't know what's happening. But Sophie is losing her mind, bro. What did you do? I didn't answer any of them because I wasn't done. Victoria watched me for a moment, then exhaled, rolling her shoulders. This is going to get ugly. I met her gaze, my voice calm. That's the point. We sat there side by side, silent, as the world we had just detonated collapsed in real time. And for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. Let them squirm, let them panic, because this was only the first blow. Within hours, Sophie's perfect little world started caving in on itself. The whispers were everywhere. Her charity board meeting, her parent group chats, the circles she clung to for social validation all tainted Victoria, and I sat back and watched it unfold. Sophie called me 7 times that morning. I didn't answer. She texted, desperate, frantic. Mark, please call me. This is all a mistake. People are saying awful things about me. You need to stop this. Can we please talk in person? Ignored her. I wasn't interested in talking. I was interested in finishing this. And that's when Victoria said the words that changed everything. Let's end it at the gala. I looked up. She was scrolling through her calendar. Cool as ever, the Whitmore and Hale charity gala is in 3 days. Everyone will be there. His firm, her friends, the press. She tilted her head. Public, unavoidable, perfect. I exhaled slowly. She was right. A charity event filled with Manhattan's elite, where Sophie and Daniel would have to show up and pretend like their worlds weren't falling apart. where we could expose them in front of the very people whose approval they craved. Brutal. I liked it. What's the plan? I asked. Victoria smirked. Simple, we make sure they walk into their own funeral. The beauty of it was that they couldn't back out. Daniel's law firm was hosting the gala, which meant he had to attend. And Sophie, she wasn't about to give up her chance to salvage her reputation. Victoria made sure of it. A few carefully placed phone calls, a subtle push in the right circles, and suddenly Sophie had no choice but to go. You're still coming to the gala, right? I heard about the rumors, but surely they aren't. True best way to shut people up is to show up like nothing's wrong. And just like that, the trap was set the night of the event. I dressed the part, a sleek black tuxedo cufflink Sophie had bought me years ago, back when her gifts still meant something. I wasn't just attending, I was staging a show. Victoria, she looked deadly. A black evening gown that hugged her frame, her hair pulled back into a sleek updo. If you didn't know any better, you'd think she was there to celebrate something. In a way, she was. We arrived together arm in arm, not because we were a couple, but because perception was everything. And when we walked in, the room stopped. I could feel it. The whispers, the stares. People had heard the rumors. They had read the texts. And now, here we were, the victims turned executioners. And then we saw them, Daniel and Sophie, standing near the bar. They looked fragile. Sophie was wearing a deep red dress, probably intentional, a statement, a distraction. Daniel, on the other hand, looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His suit was crisp, but his posture wasn't. He looked hunted, and when they finally noticed us, the blood drained from their faces. Victoria exhaled slow and controlled. Showtime. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The room belonged to us now at exactly 9:45. The lights dimmed, and the event host stepped onto the stage, a middle-aged man with a politician's charm, holding a microphone with the kind of confidence that came from not knowing what was about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? The murmur of conversation faded. This was it. The host smiled oblivious. Tonight we'd like to take a moment to recognize some very special individuals. He turned slightly. Daniel Whitmore, please. Step forward. Silence. Sophie's fingers dug into Daniel's sleeve. He didn't move. Victoria lay out a slow, mocking sigh. Oh, go on, darling. People started shifting, curious. Some clapped, assuming it was an award. Others were watching. Waiting. Daniel had no choice. He walked stiffly toward the stage. Every step, heavy-like, he was marching toward his own execution. The host continued smiling. Daniel, your reputation precedes you, but tonight we'd like to share a different side of your story. And then the screen descended. The images flickered to life. The texts, the photos, the receipts, everything projected for everyone to see. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, then whispers, then outright murmurs. Sophie's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. Her breath hitched her nails. Biting into her clutch, Daniel, he was motionless, staring, frozen in place. Victoria leaned in close. Her voice, a whisper just for him. This is what happens when you think you're untouchable. The host finally realized something was terribly wrong, fumbled 4 words. Perhaps we should. Too late, the damage was done. Daniel's law firm partners were already standing. I could hear the murmurs, words like misconduct and termination floating through the air. Sophie wasn't faring any better. Her friends gone. Her social circle silent. Her carefully curated reputation obliterated. Daniel stumbled off the stage. Pale Sophie reached for him, but he shook her off, and then they ran, slipping through the crowd like criminals fleeing a crime scene. Victoria and We stood centre stage, watching them disappear. Game, set, match. I let out a slow breath. My heartbeat finally steady. Victoria turned to me. Satisfied, I thought about it. The lies, the betrayal, the months of deception. I met her gaze. Not yet, because now it was time to bury them through the crowded ballroom, through the murmurs through the stairs that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Daniela's perfectly polished reputation destroyed Sophie's carefully curated social standing gone, but it wasn't. Over, not yet. Victoria and I didn't follow them. We didn't need to. The damage had already spread, the infection of truth seeping into every crack of their once perfect lives. We let the city do the rest. And by the next morning, the storm hit Victoria's. Phone buzzed first. She read the message slowly, her lips curving into something cold. Satisfied, then she turned the screen toward MB. Whitmore in Hale just announced, Daniel, indefinite leave of absence. Hunes out, I exhaled. That was fast. They don't tolerate scandal, she murmured. Sipping a coffee, not when their name is on the line, and after last night they had no choice. A few hours later, another update: his clients were leaving. The firm was cutting ties. Rumours of financial misconduct were starting to surface. Because here's the thing. Powerful men like Daniel don't just cheat, they cut corners. They make shady deals, they build empires on cracks, hoping no one will ever look close enough to see the fractures. And now everyone was looking. Meanwhile, my wife was unravelling in real time. She had called me 12 times before noon. I didn't pick up, but I didn't need to. The evidence of her collapse was everywhere. Her charity board gone, the parent association silent, the social invitations cancelled. Because here's another truth. Sophie didn't have friends, she had status, and when that status disappeared, so did everyone else by midday. My phone vibrated again. Another text from a mutee UAL acquaintance dude. Sophie is losing it. She's in full meltdown mode. Good let her drown in the wreckage by nightfall. She showed up at my apartment. She knocked 3 times before I even moved. I considered leaving her standing there alone in the hallway, just like she had left me alone in our marriage long before I ever knew it. But then I opened the door and there she was, a mess. Her makeup was smudged, her hair uniped, a stark contrast to the woman who'd strutted into the Chelsea lounge, confident and untouchable. The woman I once knew had been replaced by someone who looked like she had been chewed up and spit out by the very world she had once ruled. Her lips parted, trembling mark. I didn't speak, I just stared. She took a shaky breath. Can we talk? I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed about what she flinched. You know what? He tilted my head. You mean the affair? Her hands balled into fists at her sides. Mark, please just let me explain. Explain. I let out a short, humorless laugh. No, I said. Her eyes widened. No, I shrugged. No, you don't get to explain. You don't get to tell me some half-baked excuse about how it wasn't what it looked like, about how you made a mistake, about how you didn't mean for it to happen. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, tears welling in her eyes. Mark, I swear I still love you. My jaw clenched that word. Love, she had no right to use it. If you loved me, I said, slowly. Voice steady, you wouldn't have done this. Her lips parted, a plea forming in her throat. But I didn't let her speak. You weren't sorry when you snuck around, I continued. My voice low but firm. You weren't sorry. Sorry when you lied to my face. You weren't sorry when you made me feel like an idiot while you sat in hotel rooms with another man. Her breath hitched. Mark, I stepped closer, and you weren't sorry last night. I said you were embarrassed, humiliated, but not sorry. Her chest shook with a sob. Finally, she was feeling even an ounce of the pain she had shoved onto me. I was stupid. She whispered, her hands trembling. I was selfish, but it didn't mean anything. Iscoffed, it meant enough for you to risk everything's silence, and then, in the softest, weakest voice, she whispered, Can we fix this? I just stared fix it, as if she hadn't already shattered it. Beyond repair, as if she hadn't already burned every bridge between us. I exhaled slowly. No, she blinked. No, I shook my head. I've already filed for divorce. You'll hear from my lawyer soon, and just like that, her face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks, her shoulders shaking. But I felt nothing, no pity, no guilt, no regret. This wasn't a woman who loved me. This was a woman who had lost, and I wasn't about to hand her a lifeline she took. A shaky step back, then another, then finally she turned and walked away. I watched her disappear down the hall, my chest rising and falling in steady breaths, and when I finally closed the door, for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt free. Freedom felt good, but I wasn't done. Yet Sophie had lost everything, her social standing, her reputation, the pristine image she had spent years curating. But that wasn't enough, because Daniel was still standing barely, but barely wasn't good enough. Victoria. And I had taken his firm away from him. His career was spiraling, his name was being whispered in all the wrong places, but there was one last nail in the coffin that needed to be hammered. In his entire identity was built on power, status, influence. And if we were going to bury him, we had to take it all. Victoria's voice was like a razor, smooth and sharp. We need something permanent. I nodded. Something that doesn't just ruin him professionally. Something that turns him into a joke. Her lips curled. Public humiliation is temporary, but financial ruin, that's forever. And just like that, we had our answer. I had done my research. Dug deep. Daniel wasn't just a cheater, he was a fraud. A little digging into his private accounts had unearthed some interesting details off the record, transactions, under the table dealings with clients' numbers that didn't add up. Victoria had always suspected his success came too fast. She had said one night, swirling her whiskey, he went from being a mid-level attorney to a name partner in 3 years. That doesn't happen unless you're cutting corners, and now we were about to rip those corners apart. Victoria made a few calls, discreet ones that led to the right people, a former parallel from his firm, one who had left. Under mysterious circumstances, was all too happy to talk. Turns out Daniel had been manipulating case outcomes for years. A few greased palms here, a few strategically misplaced documents there. And the worst part, it wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. So we packaged everything up neatly, a full dossier of his financial misdeeds, client complaints and questionable case settlements, and we sent it straight to the press. Victoria smirked as she had S.E.D. Hunes done. I exhaled. He doesn't even know it yet. We didn't have to wait long. By noon the next day, the story had hit every major financial and legal news outlet in Manat by 5 Cuddy P. As Daniel Whitmore was officially under investigation by midnight, his name had been removed from his firm's website. And just like that, his empire collapsed while Daniel was drowning. Sophie was still grasping for air. She had moved out of our apartment. A week after the gala, her belongings packed into neat, desperate boxes. But where could she go? Her friends had abandoned her. Her family was ashamed of her. She wasn't Sophie Whitmore, the perfect wife anymore. She was Sophie, the woman who had lost everything. She hesitated, then looked out the window. I've been thinking about leaving, maybe moving to Europe for a while. A new city, a new life. I nodded. Sounds like a good idea. A comfortable silence settled between us two people who had walked through hell together. She lifted her glass to starting over. I lifted mine to starting over. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long time, I felt light. The storm had passed, and I had one. The storm had passed, but the wreckage remained for them, not for me. The Week after Victoria and I had our final drink, I found myself standing in my half-empty apartment, staring at the life Sophie and I had built, or what was left of it. Boxes lined the walls, filled with things that once meant something framed wedding. Photos, MOS from vacations, little notes she had left me over the years, lies, every single one of them. I could have burned them, could have thrown them in the trash. But I didn't, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I hadn't seen Sophie since. She walked out of my apartment that night, mascara running down her face, shoulders slumped under the weight of her own mistakes. I didn't check on her. But I heard things she had moved in with her sister in New Jersey afar. Cry from the pristine brownstone we once shared. She wasn't working, wasn't socializing. Her old friends had exiled her. The charity boards had replaced her. She wasn't anyone anymore. And part of me thought maybe this was her rock bottom. Then 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got an email from Sophie. It was short. Mark, I know you don't owe me anything. I just wanted to say, I hope you find happiness. You deserve it, Sophie. No apology, no plea, just that I didn't reply. Because some things don't deserve closure. Daniel's downfall had been glorious. The investigation into his finances destroyed. What was left of his reputation, his firm disbar him, his name was dragged through every major business publication in Manhattan. His wife left, his clients left. The last I heard, he had packed up and moved somewhere quiet, somewhere where he could pretend he wasn't the man who lost everything he had built an empire out of. Lies, and I'd burned it to the ground. Victoria left New York. She called me before she boarded her flight. I thought you weren't sentimental, I teased. I'm not, she replied, voice amused, but I wanted to say goodbye. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline through my window. Where are you headed, Paris? She said, for now, maybe London after that. I don't know, I just need something different. I nodded. You deserve that. She was quiet for a second. Then softly, so do you, I exhaled. Yeah, maybe. Another pause. Take care, Mark. She finally said, you too, Victoria. And then she was gone. A part of me knew I'd never see her again, and that was okay. Some people come into your life to destroy things with you, but they don't always stay to rebuild. I woke up the next morning and realized something strange for the first time in months. My chest didn't feel heavy. For the first time in months, I wasn't consumed by anger, betrayal, or revenge. I was free. I packed a suitcase, booked a flight not to Paris, not to Europe, but anywhere that wasn't here, anywhere that didn't have memories of her. As I stepped into the taxi, the city blurred past me, the buildings, the lights, the places where I had once been a fool. But I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't the man who waited at home while his wife snuck around. I wasn't the man who let betrayal eat him alive. I was the man who took his power back. And as the plane lifted off, carrying me away from the ruins of my old life, I smiled, because this was just the beginning. It was over. The war had been fought. The battle won, and the wreckage left behind was not mine to clean up for the first time in months. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. I wasn't waking up with rage burning in my chest or bitterness clinging to my bones. I was free. But freedom came with an unfamiliar quiet. Sophie had become nothing more than a name in old memories. I hadn't seen her since she walked away from my apartment. That night, shoulders slumped, mascara streaked across her face. She hadn't begged me to stay. She hadn't tried to undo what she did, because she knew she couldn't. She moved in with her sister in New Jersey. No longer Sophie Whitmore, the admired wife, the Socialite, the picture-perfect woman. People envied. Now she was just Sophie, a woman whose life had been burned to Ashby. Her own choices a month after the divorce was finalized. She sent me on last email, "Mark, I know you don't owe me anything. I just wanted to say I hope you find happiness. You deserve it." Sophie, I stared at it for a long time, then I deleted it. No reply. No second chances, because some things don't deserve closure. Daniel's fall was harder. His career was over. His firm disbarred him. The investigation had unearthed everything. The fraud, the under-the-table deals, the manipulated case outcomes. It wasn't just a scandal, it was a collapse. His name was poison. Now his clients abandoned him. His wife left him. The last I heard, he packed up and disappeared somewhere quiet, somewhere where the world wouldn't see his failure. He built his life on power, deception, control, and I had ripped it from him. And the best part, I never had to lift a finger, because when you shine a light on a man like Daniel Whitmore, he destroys himself. Victoria called me. Before she left, she had her ticket booked, her bags packed, and a plan for the first time in a long time. "I thought you weren't sentimental," I teased. She chuckled. "I'm not, but I wanted." To say goodbye, I leaned against my kitchen counter, staring at the Manhattan skyline. "Where are you going, Paris?" she said. "For now. Maybe London after that. I don't know. I just need something different." I nodded. "You deserve that." She was quiet for a second. Then softer. "So do you?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. We had been in the trenches together. We had burned everything down together. But this was where our paths ended, and that was okay. Some people walk into your life to help you destroy what's killing you, but they don't always stay to help you rebuild. And Victoria, she had her own life to reclaim. "Take care, Mark," she finally said. You too, Victoria." And then she was gone. The next morning, I woke up and realized something for the first time in months. I didn't feel the weight in my chest for the first time in months. I wasn't checking my phone for another betrayal, another message, another lie. The war was over and I had one. I packed a suitcase, booked a flight, not to Paris, not to Europe, but somewhere new, somewhere without ghosts. As I stepped into the taxi, the city blurred past beneath the buildings, the lights, the places where I had once been a fool. But I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't the husband waiting at home while his wife snuck around. I wasn't the man suffocating under betrayal and regret. I was the man who had taken his power back, and as the plane lifted off, carrying me away from the ruins of my old life, Ismailed, because this was just the beginning.